Welcome to It's Art, Let's Talk About It, a podcast sponsored by the Museum of Western Art in Kerrville, Texas. Located in the heart of the Texas Hill Country, the museum is dedicated to the preservation and promotion of the American West, especially through the art of the West. In this podcast series, we will visit with artists, art collectors, and gallery directors working in the Western art genre. We'll talk about the history and heritage of Western art, and we'll talk about why talking about Western art is so important. I'm Darrell Beauchamp, the Executive Director of the museum, and I'll be your host for It's Art, Let's Talk About It. The podcast is a member of the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network.
We're thrilled to announce that It's Art, Let's Talk About It was honored with a Communicators Award of Distinction for podcast in 2024. Today, Darrell visits with husband and wife, Edith and John Maskey.
And we're joined today on It's Art, Let's Talk About It by our good friends John and Edith Maskey. And welcome to the podcast, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for asking us.
Yeah, no, Edith's scared to death over there, John. She can't hardly stand it. I know this is not television, but for those of you who can, John's laid back. He's pretty cool with it, and Edith's just stiff as a board over there. She's probably never had a headset on in her life, right?
No.
She'll listen up.
But the podcast, It's Art, Let's Talk About It. As we've mentioned, we've interviewed a lot of folks over the past year on this award-winning podcast, which I enjoy saying. That's a lot of fun. But it's all about the art world, and you guys have certainly been a big part of the art world for the last, 100 years?
Close.
Seems like it anyway, doesn't it?
47.
47.
Have you really been doing this 47 years?
Yes.
Full time.
Full-time, 47 years.
Only job.
And it's the only job you've ever had?
No,
no.
But this, since
Only
we
professional
started,
job?
that's our only income. We don't have any other things.
No side gigs, no side hustles, just art.
Just art.
Art all of the time.
Yes.
Let's talk first individually, and then we'll figure out at what point we can bring the two of you together and how long you've been, because I know you've been together for longer than the art gig has been.
Yes.
You've been a partnership longer than the art thing has happened. But Edith, let's start with you. Were you one of those people who started painting when you were 3?
Not painting, but when I was little, 3 or 4, I started drawing. And I guess you would say painting, because my parents always gave me a coloring book and my Crayola box. And they didn't really encourage art, but they knew that's what made me happy. And those were my toys. I never played with dolls.
We've had discussion. I asked the same question to all the artists. How'd you get started? Jack Sorensen said he was selling postcards to his friends when he was 5 years old. You know, he was drawing on his mother's walls. I mean, he knew he was always going to be an artist, and yet Steve Talley, who's also a friend of ours, had a whole career as an astrophysicist before he became an artist a little bit later in life. And not everybody starts at the same spot. But you started when you started drawing and all that?
Copying the comic books, the papers. I loved the Lone Ranger's horse, Silver. And I guess mostly just the comic books. And then we didn't have art in school, but in the 4th grade, Sister Magellan gave us one of those little kits with 6 colors and a brush and some paper. And we learned how to pour water on a paper and let the colors just meld. And I thought it was beautiful. I mean, that was great. And then in high school, we got to do the backdrop for the school play. But up until that's all I did. I never had any training.
When did you start getting trained in this and deciding I'm going to be an artist? I mean, I guess, was it after you met John?
Oh, yeah. We had no idea we'd
Okay,
ever be.
so that's a good spot to break off. John, she started when he was 3. Did you only start when you met her? Or, I mean, it was the same kind of similar situation?
Pretty similar, yeah. When I was a kid, my brother and I would sit on the floor and look at comics, Red Rider, Lone Star, Lone Ranger, and Silver, and we'd copy them, and Little Beaver and Tonto, and we thought that was real cool, but it never occurred to me that I would ever become an artist. That was just a kid thing.
And hang on the same walls in the Museum of Western Art that Fred Harmon hangs on in his shows and stuff here at the Museum of Western Art.
Right. Yes.
Did you guys know each other growing up?
No. It was a blind date. He was going to St. Mary's University.
Okay.
That's how we met.
And you didn't know each other growing up as like high school sweethearts? And
No.
at what point were we talking about adulthood here? We were already...
I was
You were probably
20,
and
yeah.
I was maybe 21 in college, and
Yeah.
we met on
A blind date.
a blind date.
Yep.
And she's been putting your eyes out ever since then.
That's right.
But you weren't artists at that point.
No.
What were you
No.
doing?
I was going to college, and she was working as a telephone operator for the telephone company.
Yeah?
And
Yeah. One day, they knew I'd like to draw. So his mom asked me to do a little bug or something on a rock. And so I did. And after it was for the mineral show that his parents were in. And when she came back, she said, "You could sell these." She said, because it really went over big. So we started, because we lived in San Antonio, but we started driving up to the hill country, to the rivers up here, and getting white little river rock and taking it home. Then I'd clean them and I'd draw on them.
And you were one of those people drawing on river rocks.
Yes.
Did you ever draw on saws?
No. No.
Your pride wouldn't let you draw on a saw, right? So it wasn't fine art unless it was on a river rock.
So my first art show was the Starving Artist Show in San Antonio.
Okay.
And it went well. John said...
But you guys were married at this point?
Yes.
Okay. And you were working as a telephone operator. And were you still going to college, John?
No, actually, I was in college until 1960, and when I got out, my first job was with an insurance company up in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
And I sort of got misguided in college. They had these placement tests.
Yeah.
And so they analyze your likes and dislikes and so forth. Anyway, these tests indicated that I was inclined toward a creative field. Placement director was a very practical kind of guy, and I was young, and he said, "That's a youthful kind of fantasy," he said.
But no way to raise a family, right? No way to make a living, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so he steered me into a business degree, and so that's where I wound up. And my first job was Oklahoma City, and I stayed there for a year, and I wanted to come back to San Antonio. And then I was in banking, real estate, newspaper. So I was in the corporate world for about 16 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't until I encouraged Edith after we were married about 10 years, encouraged her to take some art courses. And so you can tell how that went.
I didn't know how to drive. And so John took me to class on Monday nights, and he'd drop me off, go home, and 3 hours later he'd pick me up. And we did that for about a year and a half, but in the meantime he'd seen the progress that I was making, and so he thought, I'll just go to class too. So he started coming to class, and then we went Mondays, all Wednesdays drawing, Fridays life drawing, and that was 3 hours every night. And then on weekends we'd actually be going out to shows. We started going around Texas to little shows, and then Monday morning we'd be going back.
Go back to your
work.
regular jobs. Yeah. And what year were you married?
62.
1962.
Yep.
1962.
Yes.
That was
Okay.
in the last century.
Wait. John Kennedy was president.
That's right.
That's right.
The Cold War was just...
Yeah. So this year will be, well, in fact, this month will be our 62nd anniversary.
Congratulations, 62 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Putting
right.
up with him, that's not bad.
Yeah.
That's what our guests today on It's Art, Let's Talk About It are John and Edith Maskey, and we interview them together because, quite honestly, they're both painters, both do watercolor, and pretty much everywhere you go, it's John and Edith. It's never just John or never just Edith. It's John and Edith. You guys have been kind of melded together at the hip for 62 years. I thought when we asked him to do the podcast, I couldn't ask John and not have Edith. I couldn't ask Edith. She wouldn't even talk to me without John sitting there. So I had to go borrow equipment today to even make this happen. So you started taking classes before John. Mm-hmm. That would explain why you're a little better than John, right?
I wouldn't say that, but I'll let you say it.
And John said one day, I think I can do this too. And you started taking classes. And at what point, because you were drawing, you were probably painting, you oils.
oils.
acrylics, trying to dabble in all of it. At what point did John and Edith Maskey become watercolor artist, watercolorist? That's all I've ever known you as.
I think when Mr. Hunter sort of geared us to trying it, and it was such a challenge, and it was more exciting. And
It's a tough medium.
it is.
I mean, I've heard painters, oil painters, if you will, who you try to dabble in watercolor and they give up in a hurry
Right.
because
That's
they can't control much.
Yeah.
Seems like
No.
the control issues are, some people don't have the ability to let it kind of go the way it's going to go.
Yeah.
So you were working on the weekend, selling your art, going to shows. And I know we talked about you've done the Hill Country Arts Council show, the HCAC
Yes.
show out in Ingram for 40 years.
Oh, more than that. Edith was in the first one.
I was in the first one.
Really?
She was in the first one in 1972.
I'm a heritage artist, which
Heritage
means I'm old.
Oh, you get to be in the air conditioning, right?
That's right.
That's what that means. I get to be in the air conditioning. I've seen your booth out there. It's in the air conditioning. And you've been doing that ever since. That's always in September.
Yes.
And then, John, you started doing it when?
About 5 years later, and then in the, early 2000s, the show shut down, and it was shut down for about 5 years. And then the Hill Country Arts Foundation decided they were going to revive it, and they did about 5 years ago. And they invited us to come and be and show in the gallery over there during the art fair. And they called us heritage artists because we were in the very early days of it. And so that's how that evolved. And so we have a real connection to that art show.
Let's talk about your work day. Is it, do you guys paint together?
Yes. But not always at the same time.
Yeah.
Because
Separate parts of the room, separate parts of
Yes.
the gallery space.
Yes, he's on the left and I'm on the right.
I was trying to remember how you set up your booths. That's pretty much the same there, isn't it? But you don't. You pick your own basic hours. You may start before he gets started, or he may start earlier than you. And I mean, it's just kind of
Yes.
a job for each of you individually. Do you
Bec-
talk?
Yeah.
Do we talk?
Do you talk about subject matter? Do you talk about things while you're painting?
No, we pretty much, when we start painting, we're in our own little world. We do play music,
Yeah.
but no, we don't talk. Usually around noon, around 10 or something, we'll have a coffee break and
Right.
sometimes a critique. And it's kind of the nice thing about living with another professional artist, because you get free advice,
Yeah.
whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Honey, I'm not so sure that. Yeah.
But really and truly, that is a blessing.
Yeah. I love and adore my wife, but I don't know that I could work with her. Is that challenging, working with somebody? Number one, I couldn't work at home, okay? I mean, I'm not a home worker, right? I've got to physically get up, put some clothes on, go to a different location. I've tried during COVID and other things to work from home, and I just can't do it. I don't have the discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to physically be here, because when I'm there, home is where I relax. It's not where I work. But you
Well-
work at home.
Yes. We have
Well-
500 square feet of house and 500 square feet of studio. I think the studio's taken over the house.
There you go. That works.
See, when we had full-time jobs in San Antonio, both of us, and going to art school at night and doing shows on weekends, we had bought this cabin in the Hill Country near Comfort as a weekend place. And so we were doing like more than 20 shows a year all over Texas. And like we'd get off work at Friday afternoon in San Antonio, and we'd load up and take off for Houston and set up a show Saturday morning in Houston, Saturday and Sunday. We'd get back home at midnight and go back to work the next morning. And this went on for about 4 or 5 years.
At what point did you decide, okay, we're going to burn the ships? You know, Magellan came to the new country and he burned the ships behind him so his guys couldn't go back, right? What point did you burn the ships? Did you say, we're going to be full-time,
John said, I think...
all-time artists?
Yeah, John said, I think that we should sell our house and move up there and see if we can make a living. We did.
And you did. Has it always been watercolor?
No.
Now, we started in oils. In fact, my first oil painting was an Indian, and my second was a guy on a horse.
Okay.
And I still, every now and then, like to do an oil. And I've been kind of thinking about it lately. But watercolor is our love.
That's what both of you obviously you're known for, right? Is your watercolor work. That's all, honestly, I've ever known you as is watercolor artist. Is watercolor as respected as it should be?
No.
That's a straight up answer, no. And the reason I ask that question is because I've noticed over the years, people who paint the same subject, paint the same size, paint the same styles in oil, get to command a little more money for their works than watercolorists. And that's always bothered me because it seemed like it should be the other way around. Watercolor looks like it's harder to me.
It is.
And a well executed and well done watercolor is really, hard to do.
It is, and somehow it's a perception that's developed over the years. I don't know why, but the public perceives an oil painting as maybe more valuable than a watercolor. But watercolor goes back 6,000 years.
Yeah.
Precedes oils by maybe 5,000 years.
Yeah.
And you've got people like Charlie Russell. His watercolors, of course, he's Charlie Russell.
Yeah.
But his watercolors at auction now sell for $2-3 million.
Yeah, they can. Sure.
But no, we've just drifted into watercolor, and it seemed to be our medium. And we're resigned to giving up a certain amount of, say, monetary rewards in place of using the medium that we really like.
And are really good at. Yeah. So it's been watercolor for how long?
40 years, maybe.
Probably.
The bulk.
Yes.
The bulk of the career in the business. Let's talk about shows. You said you were at one point doing 20, 30 shows a year.
Right.
That's a lot of shows.
Well, I tell you, and we paid our dues at some of them.
I mean, so it was go and set up, and the two shows I'm familiar with, you guys are at, there's the YO show there with Carol Arnold and Eric Slocum in Virginia Howe.
Yeah.
There's your booth, and it's been in the same spot the 5 years I've been coming to it. And then the Hill Country Art Foundation,
Right.
the heritage artist that you are. But there were other shows.
Oh, we did, starting out, we did any and every kind of show there was all over Texas. Houston, Austin, Dallas, Midland, down in the Rio Grande Valley. And, I mean, in heat, rain, storms.
Tent shows and outdoor shows.
We did one, I can remember, and there's a grapevine in the art community, and artists tell other artists about shows. And for 2 or 3 years, we heard about the show in Salado, and it was a one-day show, and it was in August. And and we tried, and we finally got to do the Salado show, and it was 107 degrees.
Only.
And we're out in the middle of the
Watercolors are running off the page.
And they literally carried 3 or 4 people out with heat exhaustion, and by the end of the show, our total sales were a big 0, and so we were depressed and took our stuff down, and we were loading, and we had to walk maybe 70, 80 yards across the field to load our stuff back in the van. And on one of the trips back and forth, I saw a $10 bill laying on the ground. And I just dropped what I had, and I grabbed that $10 bill. And
it's winning right there, John. Winning.
When we left, we got a couple of hamburgers and went home. But another interesting one was we had a lot of near misses. But we were at the Westbury Square show one year in Houston, out on the asphalt, and there's probably 100 artists in this show, and we're all scattered out on the asphalt, and we had our panels set up in a zigzag loaded on both sides with watercolors under glass, about 12 panels, and a gust of wind came up and flipped our panels, and it was like an explosion in the middle of the show. And the whole show stopped, and everybody just stared, and what in the hell happened over there? We lost a bit on that show.
But today, 40 some odd years later, you're not doing as many shows.
Oh, no, and we don't do any outdoor shows.
No. You just, those two, the YO show and...
The YO and...
HCAF.
And the Masters.
Right.
And then the one in Bernie. Johnny's gallery.
Texas Treasures annual.
Right. Johnny Ross's good friend of the museum, right? He's always been a big supporter of us and the artists, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah. And then we do the Arts Foundation show in the fall in Ingram. And friends of ours, some years ago, they own a winery, and they asked us to do a two-person show at their winery.
Cool. Yeah.
And we thought, that sounds like fun, and we did it, and it went very well for us, and we've been doing it ever since. And it's we get to invite all of our good collectors and have a more one-on-one personal.
I bet your collector base though is deep. I mean,
Oh,
you
it
guys
is.
over the years, I bet you have
From
developed
all
quite.
those
Oh, yeah.
different
Yeah.
towns, it was a good way to build
Yeah.
that.
And you've kept up with them, and you've kept up with
Oh, yeah.
thanking them and being a part of their lives, and
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
that's, I guess, the best way to do
Oh,
A lot of them have
that.
A lot of them have become good friends, and they're all on our mailing list, and we maintain a good mailing list.
I bet you do, yeah. One of the things that I like to ask artists, depending on where they are in their careers, you talk to some younger artists, and I'll mention like Mark McKenna, for example. I interviewed
Yes.
Mark recently on the podcast. And Mark, one of the things he said is, he said, don't ask me what to tell young artists, because he said, I'm still, feel
He's
like I'm
still
waiting on, he said, I'm afraid that I'm going to have to go to work at any minute. And he's very successful, and now he's teaching workshops, and he's doing lots of wonderful stuff. But you guys have been around the block. I mean, you've been there. I mean, it's not your first rodeo, so to speak. I wish I'd learned more at my first rodeo, but anyway, different issue. What would you tell young artists? I mean, what is the advice, the things you wish you had known?
I wish I would have started going to art school earlier. And from what I see and hear from a lot of people, it's better to go to an art school rather than take art classes at some colleges, because they can ruin a good artist. But to me, workshops are just incredibly
Well, and I've got
important.
friends in both environments, right? I mean, I've got university, college professors who teach, and I mean, we'll have this discussion, and they'll say, it's really, you got to teach the masters, you got to teach but a lot of artists are frustrated, especially in the Western art world, because they go in, and Charlie Russell's never mentioned, Frederick Remington's never mentioned, the Western art genre is, but it only represents about less than 1% of the art sold in America. I mean, think about that. It's huge for us, but for the rest of the world, Western art is not a big deal. It's not as big a deal as it is for the rest of us. But I hear that same thing regardless of every artist that workshops. Workshops, just tons.
And I don't think you're ever too old to take one. In fact, I'm thinking of if I can find like the right person and he's teaching at the right time, I would like to take another one, because anytime I do, I always learn something. You just never stop
So
learning.
you'd advise young artists to just lots of art, just paint.
Yeah.
How much of it's muscle memory? Do you have to think about it anymore?
About?
When you paint something, John, you say, I'm going to paint a figure in a doorway, or an arch. I mean, is it?
No, really, actually, when I first started studying with Warren Hunter at the Hunter School of Art in the 70s, he said, what do you want to paint? And I said, the only thing I want to paint is Mexico. And I thought, I'm going to get a negative response from him. And his answer was, Mexico is a big subject.
Yeah, it is.
And he had traveled down there himself and painted it, and it is just a wealth of diversity of subject matter. And so that's always been the main.
And most of the works I see from the two of you, both of you, John and Edith, are Mexican subjects.
Pretty much.
If not, certainly Southwest Texas and Mexico,
New
in
Mexico,
the borderland at least, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
the southern southwestern United States. I mean, I like the western states. And
What fascinates you about that? Either of you? What
colors?
Colors?
To me, the skies in New Mexico are incredible. I mean, every one. And you can go to West Texas too, and the same thing will happen. But I mean, it's just the beauty of the West and the people and the history. To me, there's a lot more history here than there is going up east.
I don't know if they would agree with that, but that's, I certainly understand your point. Our guests today are John and Edith Maskey, watercolorist, friends of the museum. And one of the things I do tell everybody is that if you want to play along as you're listening to this interview, on our website especially, we're going to have photographs of your work.
Good.
And we'll have pictures. If you can see, we did one for Todd Connor recently, put lots of works up, found things on the internet, and let people, and we tell people how to reach out to you, how to find more work. I mean, you can go out there, and how do they do that? How do they find John Maskey, for example?
They can just Google John Maskey Artist or Edith Maskey Artist, or go to our website, maskeyart.com, or they can go to our gallery, which are on our website.
Okay.
And also on the website is our email address and our studio telephone number. They can call us at our studio.
People can reach out and say, hey, I like that painting and I want one. And
Yes.
Absolutely.
certainly sell as much as you can sell. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about gallery representation. You said your galleries. Who are you represented by?
Johnny Rosa's Texas Treasures.
Right, out of Bernie, Texas.
Out of Bernie, and the Nuevo Santander Gallery in McAllen, which we've been with since they opened 20-some years ago, and it's owned by
The Guerreras.
the Guerras, who are an 8th generation South Texas ranching
Enrique
family.
and his family, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Enrique and Che and Becky.
Che and Becky.
Yes. And then we're also in the Adobe in Ruidoso, but we have not been able to send them any new work for a good while.
Okay.
So those are the galleries that we're in.
What shows do you do in addition to the Museum of Western Art Roundup every year? You've been a part of the Roundup for a number of years.
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
Which, gosh, it's flying by. I think the ones that we mentioned are all the shows that we're doing, but we'd like to try some new museum shows.
Yeah.
It would be nice to get us out again to an area that's a little further from here.
I don't remember who said it the other day, but Jason Skull quoted it. It said, "Art's not what we do; it's who we are."
Exactly.
So you guys work all the time?
No. I'm generally a morning painter. There's so many things that distract us, but I'm generally a morning painter, and I can work 3-4 hours in the morning, and then if I'm up to it in the afternoon and something else doesn't interfere, I work another hour or so. But we don't really have a daily pattern of working. I don't think Edith does either.
If I don't have to do something else, then I work.
Yeah.
But you have dishes.
How prolific are you?
I'm faster than John is.
Yeah.
But I'm not fast. I'm probably a slow painter because I like layering,
Right.
and I'm not one of those throwing the wash and.
Is it a painting a week, a painting a month, painting? How often?
It depends on the painting.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah, because if it's little, maybe I could do 2, but if it's like the one that I had here, that was a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
I'm a slow painter because of I think it's all the glazing that I do.
Okay.
And I sit back and look, and sometimes have a mirror back here to where you can look at it and see what's really wrong.
Look at it backwards and see if it's
Exactly.
that doesn't look right.
Or you can, you can turn a painting upside down while you're working on it and see the values and the abstract design that's in it, even if it's a realistic painting.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you turn it upside down, look at it, and you can see what's wrong with your design. But no, it's hard to put a time frame on a painting because you have so many interruptions. And I think the best answer I've ever heard, people at art shows will walk up in your booth and they really like a painting and they'll say, "How long did it take you to do that?" The best answer I've heard, and it's been repeated many times,
Sure.
is it took me 40 years plus 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other one is, what's your best painting? It's the next one.
The
Right?
next
That's
one.
The one I haven't messed up yet.
Yes, that's right. That's
Our
exactly.
guests today are John and Edith Maskey, watercolorists, live out of Comfort, Texas. Is that correct? Comfort? Did I get that
Comfort.
right?
That's right.
Comfort,
Comfort.
Texas. Have their little home out there in Comfort, Texas. And I oftentimes when people say, "Where are you from?" I gotta say Kerrville. They're Kerrville. They're area artists.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
You know. Do you guys think there's a difference? There's a similarity in your work because the subject matter is the same, the medium is the same. But what sets Edith apart from John?
For one thing, John can say more with fewer strokes, and you can tell he's positive about how he puts them down.
Yeah.
And I tend to be a little more picky, and I kind of think it's a little masculine, feminine thing too. A little softer on my side, but John's is like stronger. I
Yeah.
think he has a stronger design sense.
What's your answer to that same question?
Well,
What separates John and Edith Maskey, other than the signatures E. Maskey, J. Maskey, right? I mean, they're both watercolors. They're a similar sizes, similar subject matter.
Right.
Your frames are always gorgeous, but they're similar.
Right.
But how do you know a John Maskey watercolor from an Edith Maskey?
It's interesting. From my own point of view, I think Edith is more lyrical in her work, maybe a little more exuberance and a color sense.
Two big words there. Lyrical and exuberance.
He went to college.
He went to college.
But I didn't learn anything there.
Wow.
But, no, I think, and she can get more into finer detail, which I don't really choose to do.
Right.
I choose to try to say something with more suggesting it than spelling it completely out. But people will walk into our booth and they'll look at hers and they look at mine and they'll say, I can't tell your work from her work. And 30 minutes later, another person will come in and look and say, I could tell yours from across the room from hers.
Yeah, I can do that. I don't know if it's because I've seen a lot of it,
Yes.
a lot of art over the years.
You have
You
the
have a
eye.
good
But,
eye.
but it's again, it's that years of doing it. I think
Yes.
more than anything
Yes.
with it.
Exactly.
But I see where people would get the two watercolor, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
the size is the same, subject matter is the same,
Right.
but they're clearly very different thing. I got a kick out of it, and we'll start wrapping it up on this note. When we hung the current show, the 41st annual Roundup exhibition and sale, you guys were here to help us hang that, and you're volunteers at the museum, and we appreciate that. But I said, John, where do you want to be? And he said, I'll take this wall right here. I mean, that kind of thing. And I asked Edith, where do you want to be? She said, not in the same room with John.
We argue every day.
But I got a kick out of the fact we didn't want to hang them together.
We've never had an argument in 62 years like that.
Yeah.
But you know, one of the reasons is because that way we get to talk to different sets of people.
Double your chances. Yeah.
Which helps. And then afterwards we can say, who did you meet? And we talk about
And
it.
because art is who you are, not just what you do for a living, what's next for Edith Maskey?
I just want to get better. And I want to, of course, my religion, my faith is real important to me. So I just want to grow both there and in my art.
What about John? What's next for you, man?
We have been around a long time, and we're octogenarians, but we're still in the eye of the storm, and we have a full schedule of art. We want to keep growing, and there's no boundaries to art. So you just keep reaching for...
And you've already got the 42nd annual Roundup exhibition sale on your calendar.
Yep.
Participation next year in April, which I moved just because of you. Right? I mean,
We are so
for
flattered.
those people who don't know, you used to have that show. The annual Roundup was in September, and it was always that same weekend as the Hill Country Art Fair out there in Ingram. And I'd watch John and Edith come for a day of activities here. They change in a closet, then they rush to Ingram, and then come back for dinner. I mean, it was. I just couldn't stand it any longer, so we just went ahead and moved our show to April so it doesn't compete with you guys.
But made a lot of people really happy. It's
I think it's worked out. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to work out pretty well with the thing. And so,
Absolutely. Yeah.
all right. So one more time, joined by John and Edith Maskey, and your work can be found at
Maskeyart.com.
Maskey, Maskey, art.com. Just maskeyart.com. And you can go out there, and that's where you're going to find the phone numbers and the email addresses to reach out to you. We're going to have works at the bottom of the page there for you, links to your website and all of that.
Great.
Are you open for people calling and saying, hey, I'm a new artist and I'd like to visit with you about my art?
Yes.
We can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they just give me time to straighten the house up.
I mean, even over the phone or trade emails or something.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get a lot of people who say, I'm a watercolorist. What do you think of my work? And my first response is, why don't you call the Maskeys, Mark Kohler, or somebody who knows watercolor?
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Because I think it's unique, and we don't teach enough about it. There's just not enough. It seems like a lot of attention is given to oils and
Right.
You know?
That's right.
But what you were saying earlier, John, about the oils kind of had a different prestige than
Yes.
the watercolors do.
Yes.
Sculptors, Jason Skull will tell you that sculpture is what you back up and run into when you're looking at art.
That's right.
On the
That's
walls.
absolutely
Yes.
Or
correct.
it's where you put your drink on the drink pedestal. So they get no respect either, you know.
No.
I get no respect.
No respect.
No respect, you know.
Right.
But that is important to help young artists because we
yeah.
sure appreciated the help we got along the way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Who was that helped by? I mean, who did you get? Think back in your little memory bank, and who comes to mind?
I think we were extremely fortunate our first teacher was Warren Hunter, who was the premier teacher at that time in the San Antonio area.
Okay.
He was a graduate of the Art Institute of Chicago. He's done the large murals that are in the Alamo.
Sure.
And many other public commissions, and he gave us the most basic, strong foundation in art that we could possibly have. And the most important message that he gave us, I think, was he said, be who you are, paint what you love. And we followed that. That's been our guiding light, and it served us very well.
Yeah, do what you love. You'll never work a day in your life.
That's right.
And the different people, especially the people that the museum has had workshops with, we've learned a lot from those people, even though they were short periods. But Roy Anderson, I love that man. And, of course, John was like, he got to have two with
Howard Turpney. That was
Yeah.
an awesome experience. I mean, he's the most humble man and probably one of the greatest Western
And he's
artists.
considered the dean of the Western art movement
Yes,
today.
Yeah.
I mean, without a
absolutely.
doubt,
Yeah.
certainly, probably no peers. And I think in the world of current living artists, and
Yes.
what a real joy he's been over my lifetime to get to know.
Oh, yeah.
In the Western art world, we used to do, and we still do. We do 6 workshops a year here at the museum. Getting ready to do a Jack Sorensen workshop. Carol Arnold's coming up. We've done Jason Skull. We got Eric Slocum sculpture workshop coming up. Talking very seriously to guys like Scott Christensen and Kwang Ho about doing workshops, and Todd Connor, and lots of workshops I think that are possible out there. And so, but you recommend workshops,
Oh, yes.
muscle memory, paint, just
Yeah, you learn by your mistakes, too.
yeah.
And sometimes, the one thing about watercolor is sometimes the mistakes made the painting,
That's right.
Oh,
which
okay.
doesn't happen in oils.
You can watch it spread and say, stop.
Yeah, and then you think, oh my God, I couldn't do this if I tried.
That's true.
You
Very
just
true.
never know.
No.
No, you don't know, especially in watercolor. You have an idea in your mind's eye, and to get that in the finished painting, you're really lucky if you ever get it, but you might get close. And when you get one that's really there, you wonder, can I ever do that
Could I ever
again?
do it again?
Yeah, exactly. But that's what keeps you going.
It's taken me almost a year to get you on the air because I think both of you thought this is not going to be, we're going to not have anything to talk about. And here we've spent the last 45 minutes talking about art.
Great.
Hard to
Well,
believe.
you
isn't
know
it?
what?
Yes, it
you
is.
you are really put people at ease.
Yes.
I mean,
Hey, but the conversation is art. Let's talk
Well,
about
that's
it.
true.
And I get a kick out of friend Herman Walker when I did his interview for me. We can sit at this very same kitchen table that we're doing this interview with this podcast with you guys and talk art all day long. I put a headset on him and he went,
That's true. I think that's true with a lot of artists.
It's
Yeah.
intimidating.
That is.
but it's art. Let's talk about it.
You made it very
Well,
easy.
you're certainly glad you joined us today on It's Art. Let's talk about it. It's a production of the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network. Our good friends here in Kerrville who help run that. We recently won an award, an AVIA Award, the Academy of Visual Arts and Interactive Video, whatever. It's on our website. You'll see the little statue there. That's pretty cool. Had a fellow museum director tell me that's really not important until I win it.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Every award is important if you've won it, right?
Yes, exactly.
But we'll take it. We're glad to be recognized. And it's because of guests like you guys. John and Edith Maskey, our guests today on It's Art. Let's talk about it. And guys, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for everything you've done to this
Oh,
music.
it's our pleasure. So, see, Edith, that wasn't too bad, was it?
No, I'm amazed.
Didn't hardly Cost you it all. Didn't hurt very much.
Darrell, we appreciate. Oh, you're off the air. Are you off the air?
Not yet, but no.
I was going to say we appreciate you've taken this museum to a level that we've never seen before, and we're excited to be a part of it.
And we're glad you're a part of it as well. Once again, our guests today have been John and Edith Maskey on It's Art. Let's talk about it. A production of the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of It's Art. Let's talk about it. A production of the Museum of Western Art in Kerrville, Texas. We hope you'll visit the museum in person. We're located at 1550 Bandera Highway in Kerrville, Texas. Find out more about us by going to www.museumofwesternart.com. And we hope you'll join us next time for It's Art. Let's talk about it. The podcast is produced by the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network.